So, friends, welcome to the lecture series on ancient and medieval Western political philosophy or Western political thought. Today, we are going to talk about an interesting portion of Greek political philosophy. The title of the lecture is Sophism. Sophism was a pre Socratic political philosophy in ancient Greece. This was not a school of political philosophy, but we can say that it was a loose collection of political philosophers of the pre Socratic era. Sophism was basically a movement which flourished around 5th century BC. The Greek historian Xenophon was a 4th century Greek historian who described sophists as wandering teachers who offered wisdom for sale in return for money. That is, Sophism was a philosophical practice in which knowledge is sold for money. We know that the early Greek thinkers were said to be natural philosophers. I hope you remember the point in my previous lecture that we have come to know that the Neolithic world fell into a Greek miracle, and by 6th century BC, Tales of Miletus proposed a logical theory about nature. And friends, the 7th and 6th century BC era of Greece, the 7th and 6th century. BC Greece was famous for 7 sages. Famous for 7 sages. There were 7 sages who were very famous those days. And for your information, I may recite their names. Thales of Miletus. Thales of Miletus. Who proposed a famous maxim: to bring surety brings ruin. To bring surety brings ruin. The second one, Solon of Athens. Solon of Athens. And his famous maxim was, know thyself. Know thyself. That is, you should know yourself first before knowing anything else. Third, Cylon of Sparta, who had a famous maxim: do not let one's tongue outturn one's sense. Do not let one's tongue outturn one's sense. Beautiful maxim. Then Pittacus of Mytilene. Fourth one, Pittacus of Mytilene. Famous for the maxim, know thine opportunity. Know thine opportunity. You should know your opportunity. Make use of your opportunity. That is Pittacus of Mytilene. 5. Bias of Priam. Bias of Priam. He was famous for the maxim, all men are wicked. All men are wicked. There are no good people. 6th, Clebulus of Lindos. Clebulus of Lindos. Famous for the maxim, moderation is impeccable. Moderation is impeccable. And 7, Periander of Corinth. Periander of Corinth. Famous for the maxim, forethought in all things. Forethought in all things. So friends, these sages were thinking not about man and his reason and his social world. Rather, these philosophers were very much preoccupied with the nature of the universe. That is high thinking. They were thinking about stars, universe, celestial bodies, the secrets of nature. And you know, on the sidelines of these kinds of thought system, in my previous lecture I have told you that several schools of thought emerged. They were studying secrets in the nature, secrets in the universe. There was Thales of Miletus. There was the Pythagoreans who applied mathematics to understand the secrets in the nature. Hippocrates, atomist, philosophers of change. Friends, that was a scenario in the 6th century BC. And in 5th century BC, the situation again changed. This was a situation in 7th and 6th century BC in which philosophers were not looking at man and his world. Rather, philosophers were looking at the secrets in the nature. Sun, moon, and other planetary objects. That was the core thrust area of pre-Socratic philosophy. Understand secrets of nature. But friends, by 5th century BC, Greece witnessed a new movement. It was also a pre-Socratic movement, and this movement was called Sophism. Sophism, Sophism. The word Sophism was derived from Greek word Sophia. That means wisdom. And Sophos, 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 another Greek word, meaning wise, W-I-S-E, wise. Originally, that is in 5th century BC or 6th century BC, the word Sophia or Sophos denoted men of wisdom. Men of wisdom. Technically, the word Sophia and Sophos means that men who are able to teach knowledge. That was the literal interpretation of the Greek word Sophia or Sophos. So as I told you, Sophism originated by 5th century BC. And in 5th century BC, the word Sophism was applied to a class of professional teachers of rhetorics. Professional teachers of rhetorics or orators, or the professional skill for delivering good speeches. Rhetorics, the art of speaking. So sophists was basically people who are preachers of rhetorics or professional teachers of rhetorics. And in 5th century BC, friends, this word was not a word of opprobrium, means not a word of hatred. That when you utter the word Sophism in 5th century BC, people in Greece think that they are people who are able to teach you knowledge, who are professional public speakers, or who have skill in rhetorics. That was not a word people looked at with the contempt in 5th century BC. But friends, later in 4th century BC, what happens? Plato emerged in Greek's social world. In 4th century BC, Plato became a dominant, towering intellectual figure in the 4th century BC. And the later world came to know more about Sophism from the dialogues of Plato. Plato has written almost 30 books, I think. Almost 30 books he had written. And all the books were written in a dialogue format. That is, there will be a key speaker. And in all the books, the key speaker was Socrates. Socrates was the main character in Plato's dialogue. And on the one side, there will be Socrates speaking about things. And there will be several other people who are either audience or who are talking to Socrates. And all the dialogues of Plato proceeds that way, that Socrates speaking to his listeners. And the later world came to know more about Sophism from the writings of Plato. And friends, Plato had no respect for Sophism. And Plato, in his dialogues, depicted several sophists as characters. Several sophists as characters. And historians dispute whether they are actual characters, but some writers argue that most of the characters in Plato's writings, are real people. But there are several other writers or historians who dispute that argument, that even Plato, Socrates was said to be a fictional character for some writers. But anyway, historians had reached at some agreement that most of the characters in Plato's dialogues are real characters. That is why the world believed that in 5th century BC, there was what may be called a movement, Sophism. But as I told you, in 5th century BC, Sophism was not a bad word. But in 4th century BC, you will see that Sophism was not a good word. It was a bad word. And Plato says that sophists are intellectual charlatans. Intellectual charlatans. CHARLATANS. Intellectual charlatans means a person. Intellectual charlatan means a person who is fake, and who know nothing, but he claims that he knows. And Plato says that sophists are basically, the 5th century sophists are basically not real people of good character, but rather they present themselves as towering intellectuals, and they claim that I know this, I know that, I know this and that, and I have this and that skills and abilities. And such people, Plato claims intellectual charlatans who, according to Plato, falsely claims to have special skills or knowledge. Plato claims that sophists are basically intellectual charlatans who falsely claims to have special skill in something or specialized knowledge. This is what Plato talks about sophists. But as I told you, the 4th century historian Xenophon says that sophists are wandering teachers who sell knowledge for money. So Xenophon had a little bit objective interpretation of sophists, but Plato had a more, what may be called, a critical eye on sophists, and who criticized sophists and presented them as intellectual charlatans. That means people who are very fake. They present before people that I have this quality, I have that quality, and I am doing this, and I have gone there, and where from I have learned this thing, and or I have talked about this thing, or I have written this book, or I have presented that paper. These kinds of arguments. But these people are fake people because they don't have any skill. For that's why Plato says sophists are intellectual charlatans. That's why in English language, when you use the word, oh, that person, he is a sophist, he is skilled in sophistry, that means that is not a good thing. When pointing at some people, somebody is saying that that person is skilled in sophistry means that person is a fake person who falsely claims to have something. But the point is that by 5th century BC, in the Greek world, there was tremendous changes in the socio-political scenarios. Persian War finished. The Greek people defended their city-states against the Persian invasion. And Athens, by 5th century BC, Athens became a democratic society after the Persian War. Athens became a democratic society. And when Athens became a democratic society, popular assembly and the courts emerged as supreme institutions. And popular assembly became ultimate decision-making body in ancient Athens. And in political matters, popular assembly got a supreme position. So almost all the decisions that is pertaining to each individual who is a citizen of Athens was taken by popular assembly. That you want a road, or you want a particular school there. That decision is not taken by a particular individual. Rather, that decision to construct a road or to construct a school was taken by popular assembly. So that popular assembly became a very instrumental key institution in the life of an Athenian citizen by 5th century BC. Clear? So friends, but there are certain technical matters. For example, you know that most of the Greek city-states were located in the Aegean Sea. So ship building was an important activity in ancient Greece. For example, Athens needs a very good ship, for example. Athens need a very good ship for transportation. And who will take the decision? The decision will be taken by Athenian popular assembly for all the citizens. And all the citizens will take part in that decision-making body. But point is that to construct that ship, not all people are able to talk about how to construct a ship. Then who will talk? A person who has ability or who has some kind of technical expertise in shipbuilding. Then what happens? The Athenian Popular Assembly invite that particular a shipmaster or shipbuilder, and who will be requested to speak before the assembly and tell the assembly that how a ship can be built and how it can be used for transportation, and how many people will enter into that particular ship, and what is the benefit and what are the strength or weakness of that particular ship when it is used for particular kind of transportation. And this will be spoken not by an Athenian citizen, but it will be spoken by a person who is an expert in building ship. So here comes the significance of Sophism. Because not all people are able to stand in front of an audience and talk confidently. Not all the people in the world are able to talk confidently in front of a large gathering. So here, Sophism got a significance because in such an occasion, you can buy the services of a sophist, and sophist will tell you how to expertise oneself in the art of rhetorics, so that even if you don't have any skill in building a ship, falsely claim that you know how to build a ship and convince the popular assembly that you are able to build that particular ship and give me the contract. And sophist will give you that particular skill, and you can pay sophist for giving you that particular skill. So this is called demagogy. So the point is that a successful democratic politician in ancient Athens had to be an effective public speaker. It doesn't matter whether what you speak is genuine, what you speak is coming from the heart, from your heart, or whether you are a genuine person. It doesn't matter. If you are able to speak in front of a large gathering using flowery vocabulary with full of metaphors, which can persuade other people that, oh, that person is speaking right thing, then you will become a more successful politician in ancient Greece. So sophists will teach you that ability. And it was a valuable service in 5th century BC, for which sophists are paid, very well paid. And Plato, in his dialogue, Protagoras was a book of Plato, and Protagoras was a sophist, famous sophist. And Protagoras, according to Plato, had reportedly amassed considerable wealth by selling his rhetoric skill. And friends, the activity of sophists has a considerable equivalence in modern day democracy. The activities of the sophists has a considerable equivalence in democratic politics. In election years, for example, friends, in most democratic societies, the most important platform that will shape the election outcome is television and mass media, where the political figure and voters will engage through the platforms of mass media. And politicians employ the services of political consultants. You can call them the sophist. So there will be media experts, there will be pollsters, and the like. And in a society in which the ability to run effective political campaign commercials can bolster your success. So friends, therefore, sophistry is not a phenomenon confined only to ancient Greece. This is our story also. This is your story also. Because people who are able to use flowery languages persuade the masses on a particular point and buy their confidence. This is called Sophism. And this happens. This is our story also. This is not an ancient story. And the moral implication of rhetorics are addressed by Plato. Whether it's a good thing, Plato inquired himself whether Sophism is a good thing. And Plato addressed this question in one of his famous book called Gorgias. 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 Gorgias was a famous book by Plato that was written in the year 380 BC. 380 BC. Plato has written that book, Gorgias. And Gorgias, friends, Gorgias was a famous sophist in ancient Greek, a famous sophist in ancient Greece, and who has given, Plato has given the name of that person to his book, Gorgias. And Gorgias is a dialogue format. It's a dialogue format, written in dialogue format. And Gorgias was born in Sicily, present day Italy. In Sicily. And Plato presented Gorgias in a very poor light, very poor light. And Plato himself says that Gorgias was a renowned teacher of rhetoric. Plato himself admits that Gorgias was a renowned teacher of rhetoric who is skilled in the kind of questions and answer. Who is skilled in the kind of question and answer in which Socrates was very famous. In which Socrates was very famous. And Gorgias claimed that he has the ability to answer any question being asked by any citizen of ancient Greece. But Plato reported in Gorgias that Socrates defeated Gorgias in dialogues. And Plato, in his dialogue, Gorgias has said that Gorgias, the sophist, has misused his skill. Gorgias has misused his skill. And Gorgias, Plato reports about Gorgias in the dialogue titled Gorgias, that was written in 380 BC, and the story takes place in a dining table, where there are a lot of people around, where Socrates is sitting and other people in the dining area who are also sitting in front of Socrates, and they are all dining together, and where a discussion is going on. And it is through that discussion in the dining hall, Plato presents the story of Gorgias. And Gorgias, Plato says, Gorgias takes great pride in the power of rhetorics. Gorgias takes great pride in the power of rhetorics. And Gorgias believes that rhetorics is the only knowledge in the world. But Socrates convinces Gorgias. Plato report. This is a report by Plato that Socrates convinces Gorgias that Sophism is not a knowledge. Sophism is the art of persuasion. What is persuasion? That you falsely convinces people and make them believe in what you argue. That is not through logical things, but through persuasion. And Sophism is not scientific knowledge. Sophism is basically the art of persuasion, rather than teaching. A teacher who teaches and a sophist who teaches are different, friends. A teacher who teaches and a sophist who teaches are different. A teacher who is a sophist will always persuade his students. The teacher will say that I am doing this, I am going there, or I am this and that. But the teacher will be a false teacher, a fake teacher, not a real, genuine teacher. That's why Plato reported that in his Georgias that Socrates convinces Georgias, a famous ancient Athenian sophist, that Sophism is not a knowledge. Sophism is basically the art of persuasion rather than teaching. What you are doing is not teaching. This is the art of persuasion. Unlike teaching, art of persuasion is most effective before a large number of people. When there is a large number of people in front of you, instead of speaking facts and figures, instead of speaking logical facts, friends, how you can entertain the audience? You can entertain the audience by invoking their belief, invoking their faith, rather than imparting them knowledge. People will get bored when you speak facts, when you give them knowledge, but people will get interested when you give them belief, when you give them opinion, when you give them faith. This is what sophists are doing. Sophists will never impart you knowledge, but rather they will persuade you. So you will get interested in sophist. And rhetoric does not require knowledge at all. The sophist rhetorics does not require any knowledge at all, according to Plato. And Georgias says, whenever a question comes before the Athenian assembly, upon which the assembly has to take a decision, a rhetor, R-H-E-T-O-R, the one who speaks before the assembly, a rhetor will be able to convince it of the correctness of his position. A rhetor will be able to convince the assembly of his own position, even if that position is illogical and that position is not a winning position. Because rhetoric does not require knowledge. Rhetoric, according to Georgias, is better than knowledge. Rhetoric is better than knowledge. And another sophist, Protagoras. About Protagoras, Plato has also written another book titled Protagoras. And Protagoras was a book by Plato. And this story takes place in the house of Callias. Callias was another sophist. And in the house of Callias, Protagoras or Socrates is talking to Protagoras, where there is a dialogue is going on. That way, that book was written by Plato. And according to Protagoras, sophist is the teacher of the young people. Sophist is the teacher of the young people. And Protagoras is the first. Protagoras was the first openly to assume the title, the teacher of the young, the teacher of the young. And in the Protagoras, in the book Protagoras, Socrates questions Protagoras about the nature of his style of teaching. Socrates accuses Protagoras that sophists are making tall claims. Sophists are making tall claims. Socrates says, sophists are not imparting technical skills. Sophists are not imparting technical skills. Rather, sophists are imparting general competence. For example, friends, imagine you are going to attend a lecture on corona pandemic, for example, and the organizer who is going to organize that lecture invited two persons. One is a politician and another one is a doctor. Friends, naturally, whose speech will be more interesting? Is it the doctor's speech or the politician's speech? Of course, I hope that all of you agree with the fact that the speech will be more interesting when it is delivered by the politician, not the doctor. Because politicians know the art of rhetorics. Because they have that general competence, not that particular competence. And doctor has particular competence, not the general competence. So doctor's speech will be dry because he is a specialist, and the politician's speech will be interesting because he is not a specialist. He is a generalist. Generalist. Clear? So that is why Socrates vehemently opposed Protagoras, because Protagoras is not imparting specialist knowledge, rather general competence to convince people. And Protagoras goes on to identify the subject that he teaches. The subject that he teaches. And he himself claims that he teaches the political art. He teaches the political art. And he also claims that he teaches about virtue. But Plato makes it clear that the main subject which Protagoras was teaching was not political art, rather the art of persuasion. And that is not knowledge. And sophists are not basically people with knowledge. They are people with a skill in persuasion. And in Protagoras, Plato presented Hippocrates, the young physician, the Hippocrates, who was found talking on behalf of Socrates and questioning sophistry. In Protagoras, Plato presented Hippocrates on behalf of Socrates, questioning the methods of sophists. So, in short, friends, Plato had great objection towards sophistic style of teaching, because they were just rhetoricians. They were practicing just rhetorics, and they didn't propose any sound logical scientific theory or any natural philosophy. On the whole, sophists were not radical moral thinkers. Sophists were not radical moral thinkers because sophists never questioned the laws of polis. Plato himself admitted that sophists never questioned the existing social order in the ancient Greece. That's why you cannot claim that sophists were great radical moral thinkers who questioned the existing moral world. Rather, they were status quoist. Who, in a sense, just practiced rhetorics to convince their audience. In his book on nature or the non-existent. On nature or the non-existent. Georgias argued. Georgias, that was the book by Georgias, a famous sophist. The book title is On Nature or the Non-Existent. Georgias argued that nothing exists in the world. Nothing exists in the world. That was one proposition. And second proposition, that if anything does exist, for example, you believe that something exists. First proposition is that nothing exists in the world. And second proposition, suppose you believe that something exists. If anything does exist, then it cannot be known. That even if something exists in the world, you are not able to know it. And third proposition, suppose something exists and imagine that you are not in a position to know it. Suppose in case you know it, Georgius argued that knowledge of that something which is existing cannot be communicated to other people. So they were using some flowery vocabularies, like one of their interesting argument is that a half closed door is a half opened door. Right? This is called art of rhetorics. A half closed door is half opened door. Clear? A half closed door is half opened door. Right? Your sense is working. Right? Then friends, sophists will argue that then a fully opened door is a fully closed door. Clear? The logically correct. You can persuade people that if a half closed door is half opened door, then a fully closed door is fully opened door. This way, they present stylistic argument, thereby persuade people. So in a sense, friends, there are several sophists like Thrasymachus, who famously said that he was a famous sophist of the 5th century BC, who famously said that justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. The famous sophistic argument. Justice is nothing other than the advantage of the stronger. Or Protagoras, a famous saying, man is the measure of all things. Man is the measure of all things. So this way, friends, sophists has proposed several interesting rhetorics about man and his life. And some of the important sophists that you should consider are Protagoras, which I have already talked about, and Plato has written a book about Protagoras. Then Gorgias, a famous sophist about whom Plato has also written a book. Then Prodicus. Then Hippias, Hippias. Then Thrasymachus. One spelling. Thrasymachus. Thrasymachus. Then Callicles. 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 Then Antiphon. Antiphon was said to be a sophist. Antiphon. Lycophron. 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 So the main features of Sophism is that main features of Sophism is that Sophists looked at the theories proposed by early Greek thinkers, right? And I have told in one of my previous lectures that there were no consensus between different Greek schools about the nature of universe. Hippocrates said one thing, Pythagoras said another thing, atomists said some other thing, and they were opposed by philosophers of change. Then Thales of Miletus said some other thing, and there were no unity among these different schools. But all these natural philosophers of early Greek world believed that human intelligence has the power to understand the nature of secrets in the nature. We have ability to understand secrets in the nature. How we will understand? Because humans have intelligence. And friends, Sophists had criticized that. How? They had proposed several logical arguments, but that is not science. For example, you are a sick person. And you are eating something, right? And when you are a sick person, when you eat something, you will have a different taste rather than its normal taste. And that is true for you. But that is not true for all the people. And if you ask whether that particular food item tastes the same thing to all the people in the world, not at all. But that particular person is sick, that's why he tastes a different thing. And when he is in a normal situation, the taste will be different. How it happens? That means human intelligence is not that powerful enough to understand the secrets in the nature. Rather, human beings should look into ourselves. And understand the reality. That's why one of the Sophists famously said, man is the measure of everything. You need not to look into the sky, the celestial bodies, the heavenly bodies, moon or sun and other celestial objects in the sky. Why do you waste time looking into the sky? You come down, look into people, look into their intelligence and understand the nature of reality. That is what the crux of sophistic philosophy. This is not a philosophy, friends. This is, according to Plato, just art of persuasion. This way speaking, you can persuade people, believe what you said is right. It need not be science. It need not be logic. It need not be philosophy. But through this method, you can convince people. This was the intellectual foundation of what may be called Sophism, friends. And Sophists deployed an empirico-inductive method. What is empirico-inductive method? Friends, before Sophists, as I told you, there were several natural philosophers who looked into the nature and tried to understand it. And how do they try to understand it? By deploying a method of observation. And what was that method of observation? That was called deduction. What is deduction? That to understand something, what you should do? You should propose a general theory. For example, if you want to say, or if you want to understand the shape of Earth, planet Earth, you suppose you are going to deploy deduction. How you can understand the shape of Earth by using deduction. Then you are asked, first you will propose a grand theory. Before understanding that, you propose a grand theory. What is that? You will say that earth is flat, or you will say that earth is an oval shape. An oval shape. Then you collect data to confirm whether your proposition is right. This is called deduction. And this was basically a Platonic technique. And the early philosophers also, natural philosophers also use this method to understand secrets in the nature. First, you propose a grand, hypothesis about things. Then verify that hypothesis was, right or wrong. But Sophist was not like that. Sophist used empirico-inductive method. What is empirico-inductive method? For that, instead of saying that earth is oval shaped or earth is flat, a sophist will first go around planet earth, and will collect as much data to propose a theory about earth. Then you can finally say that earth is either flat or earth is an oval shaped one. This was used by Aristotle later. Empirico-inductivism. And this was the method of inquiry deployed by sophists. And friends, with this a brief lecture, let me wind up this discussion on sophism. And now the floor is open for clarifying your doubts, friends.